Start with a verse just to bring us to attention. For a generous person, merit increases. For one restraining the mind, no animosity is amassed. One who is skillful leaves evil behind. And from the ending of greed, aversion, delusion is totally free. As we worship together today, let us bathe our spirits in the pure water of wisdom, of compassion, of serenity. May we resolve that our time here today will benefit ourselves, our community, and our world. So I'm going to invite you to join me for just a minute of meditation. Take a few breaths, just easy and natural. Let your body settle. Let the breaths come and go without trying to force anything. Notice any sensations in your body. Be aware of any tension or discomfort you've been fighting. Don't try to change it, just be attentive to it. At the same time, see if you can drop any of the barriers you have erected to protect yourself from these feelings. Do the same with any tension in your mind. You've been struggling with thoughts or feelings, anything you're fighting or denying, just let go of them. Don't worry about letting go of thoughts and feelings. Let go of the resistance. Let your heart open up to whatever is going on. Just breathe and let it be. Be aware of the struggles in your life. Sense any conflict inside yourself. Is there a struggle with your body? With your feelings? With loneliness, fear, anger, craving? Have you defended yourself against this feeling, against this pain and fear? Have you created a safety net to protect yourself that has instead become an obstacle to understanding your true nature? See if you can soften your heart to whatever is present. You can drop clinging and just be with whatever is there. Let yourself fall free from your self-imposed constraints. When the bell rings and the time comes to leave meditation, try to keep this relaxed spaciousness, this peacefulness with you. So I get Dharma-related emails from various sources, and this week I got one from Tricycle, which is a Buddhist organization that publishes a magazine, among other things. And they send out this daily Dharma email, and I usually just kind of glance at them and then delete them. But this one caught my attention. It's an excerpt from a short essay by Mark Epstein, who's a psychiatrist who writes about the intersection of Buddhism and Freud. And here's what he said. We do not have to be afraid of entering unfamiliar territory once we have learned how to hold experience within the gentleness of our own minds. Learning to transform obstacles into objects of meditation provides a much-needed bridge between the stillness of the concentrated mind and the movement of real life. The title of this essay was Stopping the Wind, and so I went and online and read the rest of it. And it's an interesting little essay, and you can read it later, but it reminded me of a Zen koan. And those of you who don't know, koans are those little stories that contain teachings that you have to work out to unpack. And this particular one is from a collection of koans called The Gateless Gate. And it relates a story about the sixth patriarch of Zen. Japanese name is Ino. The Chinese name is Huineng. And I believe he was the source of the reading that Rita used to set up silent meditation earlier. Anyway, he lived about 700 AD. So when there was a Dharma talk at this particular monastery where he was, a flag would be raised outside the temple to let everyone know to come in. And these two monks had seen this and were arguing about the flag. One said the flag is moving. The other said no, the flag is not moving, the wind is moving. And they were arguing about this, and the argument had become very heated. Well, the sixth patriarch heard this argument as he walked by, and he said, not wind, not flag. The mind moves. Well, monks heard about this teaching, And word spread about it, talking about it, wondering what it meant, all of that. And so sometimes later, a group of monks were at a nun's temple not too far away, and they struck up a conversation about this wind and flag thing. And the nun, hearing it, rejected Eno's remark. She said, it's not the wind that moves, it's not the flag that moves, it's not the mind that moves. And the nun's comment became the final word on this. You're all looking very confused. Tell us.
So go on.
So the topic today is letting go. And you might be wondering, what does a 1,300-year-old argument about flags and wind have to do with letting go of whatever I'm trying to release today, now, in my life? So let me go back to this reading from Epstein. We do not have to be afraid of entering unfamiliar territory once we have learned how to hold experience in the gentleness of our own minds. So the monks who were having this silly argument had gotten hooked on their own preferences, on their dogmas, on their need to be seen as right. In short, they were hooked on their way of seeing the world and their belief about what the world should be. Eno's comment was to help them see how their minds were being pushed around by this clinging, and the resulting wind of mental fabrication were creating a storm. And he was correct in that their minds were determining their experience, not the wind or the flag. The nun's remark suggests that they had not learned, and he had not learned, as Epstein says, to hold experience within the gentleness of their minds. The monks and the patriarch were overlooking the opportunity to bridge the stillness of the concentrated mind and the movement of real life. So in meditation, we develop a skill of letting things go so that we can use it in daily life. In terms of path of practice, this is what we mean by right effort. If a harmful mental state arises, you let it go. And you also do what you can to prevent it arising again. So if you're meditating, for example, and anger comes up or anxiety, you let it go. And you try to keep it returning. Not by repressing it or forbidding yourself to experience it. You prevent its arising by keeping your mind still. Right effort also means that we cultivate helpful mental states like gratitude and goodwill and things like that. But this is a two-part process. We're letting go and we're cultivating. So I was at my desk one afternoon and phone rang, and it was this man who lives in Lake Helen, which is not too far from the land where I live. And he said he'd gotten interested in Buddhism and he wanted some guidance in Buddhist practice. And I said, well, you've called the right person. And so I told him about our meetings and invited him to come. But he didn't want to do that. He said, well, I want to turn my backyard into a meditation garden so that I'll have a place to meditate. Can you come over and help me with that? I didn't quite know what to say. He was convinced that his first step toward Buddhist practice would require a garden in his backyard, and he seemed genuinely surprised when I said I didn't go around helping people design gardens. And I suggested that he contact a landscape architect. So gardening is important, but the important garden is not in the backyard, it's in the mind. If you're a gardener, you know to plant seeds that you want to have ripen, and you nurture them so that they'll grow and be healthy. But first you need to clear the ground of weeds and other unwanted vegetation. And then you try to keep the soil free of those seeds, help keep them from sprouting. And if they do come up, you remove them by the roots. And it's the same with the mind. You clear away the hindrances to make room for spiritual growth. So a little over 30 years ago, I came to this realization with the help from a counselor that my drinking was causing a lot of trouble. And so I made a commitment to give it up. And a few days after I made that commitment, I went to the opera with some family members. My mom had gotten tickets to see Faust. And so during the intermission, I went out to the lobby, and there were a lot of people standing around with glasses of champagne in their hands. And I thought, boy, that looks good. And that craving that arose led to thoughts of arising, one little glass of champagne won't hurt, I can quit drinking later, it'd be better to do it on a Monday anyway, all this kind of thing. But I recognized what was going on, and I started letting those thoughts drop. I started letting go of cravings. And so after intermission, back in the theater, sitting in the dark, listening to Faust wrestling with his demon, I started watching my cravings arise. And one by one, I let them go. I let go of champagne. I let go of my favorite beer, which was difficult. I let go of cognac. And on and on. And by the end of the show, I had this amazing feeling of lightness. I had defeated that particular demon, at least for then. Urges would arise later, but I had had this practice of letting them go in the past. And so I understood that these weren't real. They were just fragments of thought and sensation that I didn't have to cling to. So recently, a couple of inmates were talking in our meeting at Palatka Correctional Institution. One was saying that somebody in his dorm was asking him what he gets out of practicing Buddhism. And he told him that what he got wasn't nearly as important as what he lost. And by that he meant that what he was losing, what he was letting go of, were things that had caused him a lot of suffering for a long time. But it's hard to let go of things if you don't recognize the benefit of losing it. We hold on to things because we're comfortable with them. We're afraid of what will happen if we let them go, even if we're letting go of things that are clearly causing us misery. There's a TV show called Hoarders. Have you ever seen that? It's about people who hoard things to the point that they're living with such piles of junk that it causes them real trouble. And the producers bring in experts, counselors, and cleanup teams, and family members that are trying to help them. And they go through this process of cleaning up their homes. And for most of the hoarders, this is a very traumatic experience. They might be climbing over piles of junk to get to their beds. They might even be in danger of being evicted or institutionalized or losing their kids or their pets. But to give up these useless things is very difficult because they become so comfortable with them. And these objects create a sense of meaning, even if that sense is superficial or even destructive. But now and then, one of these hoarders will be really committed to the cleanup process. They may have trouble at first letting go of things, but pretty soon, once they begin, it starts to feel good. And they start experiencing joy from getting this junk out of their lives, and you'll see them happily throwing things into the dumpster. So probably nobody here today is abusing substances or using substances or hoarding, but how much mental junk do we all have to climb over to get to where we want to go? How many emotional hang-ups and opinions and dogmas and fears and things like that do we have to find our way through to get to something freer? So like the hoarders, we have to get a glimpse that there's a benefit to letting go of this pile of mental junk before we're ready to turn it loose. I heard this story from the abbot at the Thai temple where I ordained the first time. Two monks lived in the same monastery for many years, and they became great friends. And they agreed that after they died, they would look for each other and be friends again in their next life. And they died within a few months of each other. And one of them was reborn in the heaven realm. And so he was hanging out there being very happy at Dewa and at one of the imperial lands, enjoying all these heavenly pleasures. But then one day he started thinking about his friend, and he started wondering, where did he go? And so, Devas in heaven realms have special powers. And so he kind of sent his consciousness out to explore that realm, and he didn't see him. And so he looked through a bunch of other heavens, and he didn't see him in any of those either. He thought, well, surely he must not have been reborn a human being, but he thought he would go and look for him anyway. And so he looked through the human realm, he didn't see him there. So he started looking through the animals. And finally he found him in a cow pasture, a worm living in a pile of cow dung. So he said, well, that won't do at all. I've got to help him out. And so he goes down to this cow pasture and he starts yelling at this pile of cow manure, saying, hey, come out. So eventually the worm kind of sticks his head out of this pile of poop and he says, who are you? What are you doing? And the Dewa explained that we used to be monks together in a past life, and he says, I've come to take you up to the heavens where their life is wonderful and blissful. And the worm said, go away. And the monk said, but I'm your friend, and this is a heaven realm. And he describes how wonderful and beautiful it is and everything. And the worm says, no, I'm quite happy here in my dung pile, please go away. The heavenly being thought, well, if I can just grab hold of him and take him up to heaven, he'll see how good it is for himself, and he'll be happy to be there. So he grabbed a hold of the worm, and he started trying to pull him out. But the harder he tugged, the harder the worm clung to his pile of dung. So the point of this story, of course, is that if all you know is this pile of dung, you think that's as good as it gets. The first step in freedom is to realize that where you are, even though it's comfortable, even though it may seem pleasant to you, is unsatisfactory and there's something better available. Sometimes we're okay with letting things go until it comes to our feelings about things like injustice, our anger about truly bad situations and things like that. And I get it. I read a story in the New Yorker yesterday about treatment of immigrant children in these holding facilities. And it kind of made me want to go punch somebody.
Yeah.
But I was able to let go of that urge, partly because, they might punch me back. But I saw this interesting comment a while back from Sylvia Boorstein. She was talking about being interviewed on talk radio after her book, Don't Just Do Something, Sit There, came out. And the radio host, who was very political, said, I've been telling people to get riled up and go out and change things. And she said, I tell them, go to City Hall, go to your legislators, get on school boards, make a difference. And you, Sylvia Boorstein, are telling people, don't just do something, sit there. What do you have to say for yourself? And Boorstein said, I couldn't agree with you more. Absolutely. Each of us is obligated to make a difference, to act when we see that something needs to be done. I'm suggesting that it's valuable to be still long enough to figure out what would be the most helpful thing to do. So if you can't let your mind rest, it's very difficult to see clearly what might be helpful. And not only that, but you can wear yourself out. You can experience compassion fatigue and things like that because you don't know how to stop doing something even when you're not really doing anything. And so to let the mind rest requires letting go of things that want to stir up the wind of emotion. We would probably be more just as a society if we learned to settle down. And if you want to fight injustice, you'll be better at it if you can be calmer in the process. If you really want to move forward with your spiritual life, you have to let go of your ego too. And this is the ultimate act of letting go. It's the one that will get you the farthest in your spiritual life. And it's the scariest. So there's an old Japanese story about a samurai coming into a tea house. And so tea houses were constructed with a low doorway, so you kind of had to scoot to the stoop to get in, which meant you came in bowing. And the samurai didn't like that already because, he's a samurai. He didn't want to have to bow to anybody. But he comes in and he's determined that he's going to learn about tea. And so he starts shouting for the tea master to come out here and teach me about tea right away. I have to do this. So the master sighs and he agrees. He says, have a seat. I'll take care of this. And so with great focus, he begins to make hot water for tea. And then he puts the drinking bowl in front of the samurai. He begins to pour. And he fills the cup. And then he keeps pouring until the tea runs over the rim and into the samurai's lap. Well, the samurai is really mad now, and he jumps up and says, are you crazy? You scalded me. And he starts to reach for his sword, and the master looks at him and he says very calmly, I didn't want to teach you about tea, because you're like that cup. I can't put wisdom into a cup that's already full of ego. You have to empty it out first to make room, or all we'll accomplish is to make a big mess. So you're not going to have much luck making spiritual progress if you can't stop clinging to your ego. You have to empty yourself out a little bit first. So this is letting go. Letting go isn't giving up in the sense of stopping out of losing hope. Giving up is in the sense of transcending, giving up old ways of being in favor of new ways of being. So I'm going to share one more story with you. There's a Zen story about a young monk who is on the brink of realization. And his master recognizes this, and he sees he's having trouble making a breakthrough. So he tells him, go up the mountain behind the monastery, climb to the top of the mountain, and sit there until you have awakened. And so the monk does as he's told. He packs up his few meager things that he's going to need. And he starts going up this narrow mountain path. And he gets about halfway up the mountain. And it's very narrow, and he meets somebody coming down the other side, an old man with a bundle of sticks on his shoulder. And so they kind of have to jockey around each other a little bit. They decide this is a good place to sit down and rest for a minute. And so they're sitting, resting, and just chatting a little bit. Monk says, "What are you doing?" He says, "Well, I've gathered firewood. I'm going to take it down to the village to sell." And he asks the monk, "What are you doing?" He says, "Well, my master tells me to go sit on top of this mountain until I'm enlightened." Oh. So they get up to go on their separate paths, and the monk goes, "Hey, what do you think about this enlightenment stuff anyway?" And the old man drops his sticks, and they hit the path and scatter. And at that moment, the monk is enlightened. So he stands there, just sort of basking in this. And then he says, "What now?" The old fellow picks up his sticks, puts them on his shoulder, and continues down the path. So that's what happens, and a lot of time people are worried about letting go because they're not sure what's going to happen now. What happens is that we continue to live our lives, but we do it in a freer, more expressive way.